I don't really know you, but I sort of know you because I'm in your platform
Right.
for quite a few years.
Yeah, thank you.
Who are you? Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself? You told me you're in Japan with your girlfriend. You gave me a few glimpses of who you are, but I'd love to hear more from you.
Sure. I think if we really bring it down, I'm someone that enjoys solving problems. I'm someone that loves puzzles. I'm a tinker, and I'm someone that loves to experiment and invent new things, you could say. And all of that together started a lot of companies, or at least a lot of projects. I'm not sure you can actually call them companies. And out of that has grown this thing that I'm running now, MentorCruise. Kind of a culmination of, all my backgrounds, all my interests have come together in this project. And so I've been running it for a lot of years. It's been probably 7 or 8 years by now that I'm running it, but obviously full time it's been 4 years or so. So has been a side project for a long time, and kind of side projects have been something that I've been doing all my life. Basically, I used to be known at work as a side project guy that always had something going on the side. That side project has become a main thing now, and so that's what I'm doing right now, day to day.
Aside from Mentor Cruise, how's your life? Do you have siblings, family? You told me you're in Japan with your girlfriend. Tell me a little bit more about you as a person.
I'm an only child actually. So I grew up as an only child. I grew up in Switzerland in the Alpine mountains. So I'm not from the city. I grew up in largely small towns, small villages, and for the most part, had a good childhood, definitely not without issues, as anyone does, not without any hardships, but for the most part, I would call it a nice childhood. And as I was saying, my interest was always in inventing and tinkering and experimenting. And so I've been doing that since childhood, be it with small businesses and trying to get a bit of pocket money here and there. I think one of my side hustles early on was setting up my neighbors' iPhones. They would give me $10 to set up their iPhones, and I've always been technically inclined. And so that's how I used to get a bit of pocket money here and there. But obviously just creative outlets, not necessarily drawing, singing, whatever, but electronics, designing things, robotics, that kind of stuff was always something that fascinated me, because it goes into the same skill set again of just solving a puzzle, maybe solving a puzzle with more at stake than an actual puzzle. What else? I've always been a great student, but I've never enjoyed school. And so when I was 15 years old, I graduated from high school, and I decided I didn't want to go to college at that point. And so I actually reached out to like companies nearby, and got a job as a software engineer at like 15 years old, and just started writing software. The good thing is in Switzerland, that's a somewhat supported path. There's a certificate if you do that. There's a 4-year apprenticeship program that you can do. So it wasn't totally rebellious and just trying to do something that no one has done before. It was just a different path. I think a lot of people were kind of expecting from an A student to go to university to study something, and that was just a path that wasn't attractive to me. And so, yeah, at 15 years old, I started writing software, started working at a company, started working with clients. And so it's sometimes funny when I tell people I've been writing software for 13 years, which sounds like an incredibly long time. But by now, it's basically half my life. So for half of my life, I've been writing software and doing that kind of stuff.
I come from a Mediterranean culture, and if I would tell my parents that I'm not planning to go to college or university, they would go Hulk mode. They would go crazy. They would go
Yeah.
nuts. How did your parents take it?
My parents are very supportive. I think I'm lucky in the regard that my dad actually went to university, and I think he kind of holds it in a somewhat low low esteem. So he kind of knew that you can do your own path, whatever you want to do. You can probably do it whether you go to university or not. So actually very supportive. I think it was more a surprise with other people in my life, especially teachers, because you're seeing a person that's like good in school, gets good grades, is diligent and does their homework and whatever, and they don't enjoy school and don't want to go to school anymore. It feels a bit of a clash, right? But in the end, those are opinions that maybe to a young child matter, but in the end, it's your own life, and your parents are going to be with you for a long time, but teachers aren't going to be. So wasn't a big problem. And so I had full support in that decision. Again, it wasn't so much of dropping out of school. I think that would have been an issue as well, but it was more like going an alternative path that in itself still would have been exciting.
Maybe I'm projecting here, but I also see myself as someone that constantly needs to build something. And typically, when the building stops and I have to run it or it starts growing, I don't like it as much anymore. I enjoy the thrill of building it at the beginning. You started building MentorCruise a few years ago, quite a few years ago, and now it's a solid company. You have a team. At the moment, you are in Japan, I guess, running it remotely. Are there any things that you can do, but are not really your cup of tea anymore, or you don't enjoy them as much, or the opposite, things that you didn't enjoy doing, or you didn't expect that you would enjoy doing, and now you are happy to do them?
Yeah, I think what's nice about the business is from the start, I designed it in a way that I would like to run it. So it's not an orthodox business. It's not a traditional business where people are frustrated that they've become a manager, stuff like that, and now they need to, do paperwork all day or sit in meetings all day. I think that was a mindful decision to make, that I want to run a business that's a little bit different. And in my life, I also had the opportunity to work in a lot of companies that are non-traditional, fully remote companies with strong culture. And I guess I've took the pieces from my experience and my life in building my own business. And so it's not a frustrating business at all. It's a business that's fully remote, that runs mostly async, that has very talented people in it, not people that need micromanagement or anything like that. Very talented people that can work individually and take their own responsibility. And so I wouldn't say that I don't enjoy any aspect of running the business. That being said, I was telling you that for half of my life, I was writing software. It's obviously a big part of what I do. And as you say, at the start of a project like this, it's just about building it. So you get to flex your code muscles, you get to flex your design and product muscles. And obviously, that doesn't necessarily become less relevant as you grow the business. Obviously, we still need to have a lot of code. We still need to make product decisions and design decisions. But it most likely doesn't become the most efficient way to spend your time to, lock in a day and just spend it all day in code. That would have been a day that I could have spent otherwise in a lot of different areas. And I think kind of goes hand in hand, because that's not the most efficient way to spend my time. It's also something that I don't necessarily enjoy doing as much anymore. Again, I'm a tinker, I'm an experimenter. I like to build something new, maybe just experiment with something, maybe try out a concept or something. I still very much enjoy creating things and writing code to create things. But within my day job, it's no longer something that's a very efficient use of my time. And so I guess in that sense, I've become more of like a supporter to my team. I'm hiring really great, talented people. And so my job in the end is just to like get them unblocked and, let them do their best work. And so that in itself is fulfilling to me, because it's a company that I've built. It's a company that I continue building. It's something that a lot of people find useful. And that in itself is quite rewarding to me. And so whatever needs to be done, I'm kind of happy to do.
Someone that was writing code for 13 years and now managing people, being a people manager, trying to make others do their best work, as you said. How was that transition for you? Did it have any hiccups, any issues, or you did it naturally?
I wouldn't say naturally, but not necessarily hiccups either. I think it was a slow transition, because we're a bootstrap business. I think bootstrapping a business takes decades, not years. And so that was a gradient over the last 8 years or so, where the first hire I've ever done was maybe 2 or 3 years in. That was a customer supporter. And that was out of pure necessity because I was still holding a day job and I couldn't spend my mornings an hour or two in customer support. And so that was the first set of helping hands, was just someone that helps me with customer support. That is still being a manager, right? At the end of the day, you do have a part-time employee, but it's also, I would say, somewhat easy because you're just in constant exchange with this one person that helps you go through customer support, helps you be a representative of your company. But it's more almost working with a friend on like a group project or something like that. And then a year or two later, we added our second team member, which, if I remember correctly, must have been either someone in marketing or a developer. And again, now you've worked with the customer support for a year or two. Now the second person comes in. So it's kind of an iteration. It's kind of leveling up over the years, but it's not a sudden burst or a sudden change where suddenly you're going from a maker and a coder to a full-time manager. It's just you're adding people to the team. They need a bit of support in their day-to-day work, and suddenly a bit more and a bit more of your day is dedicated to supporting people in your team, right? So it's a long-term transition and something that's very easy to get used to.
You said something before that I would hear it from other people, but I never really internalized it myself. I heard it first time from a guy called Louis Grenier, who said that I build a community that is not overwhelming to me. And now you said that you build a company in a way that you would enjoy running it.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they constantly are dealing with the guilt of the things that they are not doing. They're thinking, I must do that. But at the end of the day, because they don't want to do that, they don't do it. And they're constantly in that, I must do that, but I don't want to do that. And you're the second person that I hear recently saying I did it, but in my own way. That is not overwhelming to me. I was wondering if you identify yourself at all to that feeling of I have to do something, but I hate it. But I must do it, but I hate it.
I think that's the feeling I always wanted to avoid. So I heard about that a lot as well. And there's a couple of decisions when you think about startups that I just couldn't identify myself with. So just kind of naturally, I broke it down to why am I doing this and what do I want to get out of it? And I think the main things I wanted was financial independence, location independence, and time independence. Those were the most important. Basically, do whatever I want at any time with anyone that I enjoy on my own terms, right? I think that was the main thing. And so then the question becomes, is building a company compatible with that? And I think traditionally, no, right? Because traditionally you have an idea, you would go out and find investors to help you fund that idea because you need to get it off the ground quickly and you need funding to quit your job basically and start building this thing. And suddenly you no longer have financial independence because you're dependent on these investors. You most likely also don't have location independence because your investors will not like it if you just move to Japan on a whim away from, whatever place you're in. So those are things that I wanted to avoid. And then we come to running a business where people are frustrated with sitting in meetings all day, where people are frustrated with working with people that they don't enjoy working with. And so I wanted to avoid that as well and make sure that it's a remote company, but also an async company, that we spend more of our time in chat rooms, emails, writing to each other instead of, sitting on meetings all day, because I wanted to have the freedom to work on creative avenues, on deep work, maybe not work at all and just move to Japan without the business being disrupted. Now, a business like that comes with, downsides as well. I think we had to give up a lot of opportunities. We had to give up a lot of growth opportunities. At the end of the day, we had to give up revenue and money for this to happen. But for me, that's the only way I would want to run this business. And it also, ensures to some degree that I can run this business for the next 10 years. I've been on it for a couple of years, but, it's a business that I could easily run for the next 10 years and still be happy to work at, motivated to work and wanting to grow further. And I think that's not the case when, in my case, it would have been the traditional business of getting funding and being in an office, probably somewhere in Switzerland. I would have probably said after a couple of years, this needs to work out, or I need to sell it, or I need to do something with it because how it is today, it can't go on. And that's not the case for me right now at all. It's a business that I'm happy to run for a long time.
It sounds to me that you must have also given up this feeling of controlling everything that a typical founder would have. If you have built a company that gives you that flexibility and you can also experience that internally, is that true? Because while I'm listening, I'm also wondering, yeah, everyone wants to build that. What have you sacrificed here? Or what type of, how did you elevate yourself so that that can be achieved? Because the last time that I tried to do that, I just wouldn't be able to do that. Wouldn't be able to not be very close to the people executing the strategies. Even if I would decide that, you know what, I want to go to Japan, my brain would be there all the time. I wouldn't be able to relax and enjoy my trip or just enjoy the place or enjoy my life with such a time difference. So what is the secret here?
I think ultimately it's confidence in your team and the people that you hire. And it's definitely not something that I could do alone. There's a lot of moving parts in this kind of business. And so the magic is really partly because we are a remote and an async company. We can hire from the global talent pool, right? We're not just focused on Switzerland. We can hire from anywhere. And I think the nice part about this is I can hire the greatest minds in the world, right? Like I can go out, I search, I can post a job post and basically hire from the entire world and see, who is out there and who fits us. And so I think our team is extremely talented and just an extremely insanely talented team. And that gives me the confidence to say, whatever they're doing it much better than I ever could. And I think that's the goal. I think the idea of control comes from the idea, if you're a founder, that I know it all and that I know it best as well. So I need to be in control of anything, because if I'm not in control, it's not going to get done to the highest degree. But if you hire the best people in the world, you end up with a feeling of, if I put my fingers and my hands in this, it's going to get worse than if I just let this insanely talented person do their thing. That feeling, that comes with time. I think that's not something that you have from day one. That comes with stability and a business at a certain size. But at that point, you have a team that executes at a level much, much higher than you ever could. Why would you want to micromanage it? Why would you want to? So yeah, trust and talent are the two keywords I would say, of having trust in your people, and they have the kind of talent to pay that trust back to you with execution at an incredibly high level.
Since we talk about your company and how you run it, I was wondering if there are times within that setup that you are feeling alone.
Yeah, I think not necessarily alone on a personal level, but alone on a professional level, I would say all the time. Because what happens when you run a company, the biggest difference from just working a regular job is that the responsibility ends with you. There's no boss, no manager that you can basically message and say, hey, can you take care of this for me? If you're on vacation, you do not have a replacement for your vacation. You do not have an out of office notice where basically saying, hey, I'm back in 2 weeks, message me then. And so in that sense, it's very lonely, because there's no one that you can truly rely on. There's people that you can rely on for support, family, support network, partners. But when it comes to just plain old responsibilities in running a business or fulfilling a job, you're where it stops. Yeah, the results, the challenges, any problems in the business, you're going to be responsible for. And then it doesn't matter whether you're in Japan or vacation, or you are really stressed, close to burnout, whatever, you're going to have to take care of it. And that's a feeling that's very hard to share with someone else, right? I can tell my partner, my girlfriend, I can tell her what I'm feeling, but in the end, there's nothing that she can do, right? And there's nothing that my team can do. And there's no one else. There's no boss that I could give this responsibility to. So yeah, it's a lonely journey in terms of just responsibility and risk to some degree as well. I don't necessarily think it's lonely in terms of companionship. because there's a lot of other founders out there. There's communities, there's people that can relate to you. There's just no one that can actually help you at the end of the day.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So that leads me to the next question, which is, who are you talking with when you have these issues, doubts, stress, dilemmas? But before I go to that question, because you already partially answered it, I'd like to ask you if you can share a story, because I understand you represent your company. So if there is something safe that you can share where you had to deal with the problem yourself and fix it, and how you felt about it.
Yeah. There's one story that I can share because it's been many years that I kind of credit with being one of the more traumatic episodes of running a business. But I think it's also one of those stories that nowadays I look back at it and said, if I can deal with this, I can deal with anything. So I built a lot of mental resilience as well. And looking back, it doesn't sound as dramatic, but we run a marketplace. So we take in people's money, we process it, we send it out to other people. And I was running it as a side project for a long time, but obviously it started growing over the years. And it started being $50,000, $60,000 that we started processing per month, paying out to other mentors. And I've been doing it for 1 or 2 years, so it was still a part-time job at this moment, or a side project at the end of the day. But the kind of money amounts that were flowing through were starting getting quite substantial. And so I believe we had something like $75,000 in a bank account, and I was like getting ready to get to work. I had my customer supporter working for me, and suddenly we're getting all these emails, and the email said our bank account is getting blocked. $1,000 in a bank account, and it got frozen. There's a need for more verification, all these financial processes that are around. Under the line is going to be $75,000 blocked in a bank account and not be paid out to our mentors, our partners on the platform. So essentially, I'm waking up. I need to get to work in half an hour, but the realistic scenario is $75,000 owed to other people that I cannot access, and I need to find a solution now. And so that's what I was talking about in terms of you do not have a replacement or someone that can take care of these things for you. This was me trying to get to work in an hour, but I was $75,000 in debt to other people, and I needed to get that money. I needed to get that frozen bank account unlocked somehow. And so those are the difficult decisions where I actually had to call into work. Luckily, at that point, they were kind of aware of my side project, so I was never secret about it. But I basically told him I cannot come to work right now. Like, I have a very bad clash and I need to work this out. And I spent 2 full days on the phone with both our own bank and also other banks. And dealing with banks is probably one of the most annoying aspects of running a business, because a lot of things are digital right now. A lot of things are easy to solve, but banks are not. Banks are very much still either call me on the phone or come by in person and sign a paper and do stuff like that. And so that felt like a bit of an adventure where I had this looming threat over my head of just a lot of money that's gone or in debt or whatever's happening to it. And the only solution to it was I need to find a way to either get that money or get some other money and get people paid. And so I spent days on the phone with banks, with payment providers. I went to actual bank branches in person. I was like, can you help me? Can you set this up? And so that felt like one of the more drastic moments where I actually had to, first of all, to let go of a lot of other responsibilities that I still had at the time. Basically, that was something that impacted my day job, but that would be something that would impact my work with MentorCruise at this time as well. And I had to travel around. I had to do whatever is necessary to get this solved. And for 2 full days, I didn't know whether I would have a company in, a couple of hours. That would have just taken one of our mentors, one of our partners to inquire and say, why is my money a couple of days late? And it could have ended pretty badly, right? We could have ceased to exist as a company if things went super wrong. If that money was gone forever, if that money wasn't recoverable for whatever reason, that would have been very bad for me personally, but also obviously the company would basically be done at this point. And so stakes extremely high, literally life of the company, no one else to help you. You can reach out to other people for help, for introductions, for that kind of stuff, but the responsibility is with me, and immense time pressure. In the end, we got it solved. We both got the account unblocked. They were no longer ready to kind of work with us just because they didn't support our like marketplace thing, but they unblocked our money and we found a different payment provider that we were able to work with, that we actually still work with to this day. And so everything got solved, but that was a 48-hour period where it wasn't clear whether the business would still exist after those 48 hours. So yeah, nowadays I look back at it, I'm like, if I can survive this, if I can solve this, I can probably solve anything. But at
If
the
you
time, it wasn't
physically
that funny.
survive this,
Yeah,
like if your heart didn't stop working.
exactly.
I wanted to ask you what was happening with your customer support person. Were there inquiries and questions already?
I don't actually remember. There might have been one or two. I was more scared about like this dragging on for a month or so. In the end, I'm very happy that we got it solved after 2 days. There might have been an inquiry or two, and then it's pretty easy to say, hey, there's a delay. There's something that we need to do. But obviously, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it gets. And in the end, that's money owed, and that's money that we need to give to people. So was something that needed to get solved one way or another. But yeah, got out of it in the end, more or less unscathed, a bit of high pulse, a bit of trauma and whatnot to do in the future. But in the end, it got solved all well.
I'm wondering if you remember, of course, you said the 48 hours. How was the night before the second day? The night that you slept believing that you might have a debt of 75K. Do you remember that?
If I remember correctly, I don't think there was a night, to be honest.
Okay.
There might have been no night. I probably used that time to like leverage US time zones to inquire with US suppliers and try to get a bank over there or something like that. I honestly don't remember actually sleeping at that point. Or I might have just taken a nap or something like that out of sheer tiredness and trying to get some sleep in. But it definitely wasn't a nice and peaceful night of sleep.
I want to change a little bit the topic. I wrote today and I posted an article about some archetypes ultimately of parents, of high performers, high achievers. Of course, nothing is set in stone, but there are always some patterns between what makes a person seek for high performance or high achievements. And I was wondering, while you were growing, do you remember one of your parents or your parents expecting something from you or being raised in a certain way that made you who you are today?
I think the most prominent example, both in my childhood and then actually while working on MentorCruise as well, was my dad, because my dad was both a cautionary tale, but also an advisor of how I don't want to run the business. So he has had businesses in the past, but for most of his life, he was in a high performance sales job, actually. A lot of time spent on the road, a lot of time getting to customers, very much a traditional business where you need to like drive to the customer and shake hands and get a contract signed in person. But nevertheless, it's a job that's like long hours, high performance, high expectations from bosses and stakeholders and so on. And so both me just observing that, but also him giving me advice was something that led to, what we discussed before with me not wanting to run a business where I have external stakeholders, investors that like tie me down to a place or a time or a way of working. And with him, it ended up in like severe burnout multiple times, severe, stays in clinics in the end of the day and trying to just get everything fixed that was created by like stress and high expectations. And so I just never wanted to get into a situation like that. Again, my priority was independence, high quality of life. Those things were ultimately more important to me than both, total earnings, but also obviously reputation and that kind of stuff. I think for him, it was a job where, you spend most of your day in a suit and in a nice company car. So I think there's a lot of reputation and achievement that comes with it. And obviously the money's there as well. But the downside of it is pretty steep in terms of mental and physical health as well. I think if you spend most of your day in a car in between client meetings, that's also not great for your physical health. And so that's just, my priorities, looking at that, my priorities have always been with quality of life and actually physical as well as mental health as well. Just being able to take care of that and also having the space to take care of that.
Were you actively encouraged by your dad to build something with different values, or you saw this paradigm and you empathized and you were like, no, I don't want that?
Probably a little bit of both. More so because obviously I interacted with my dad and I knew that he wasn't satisfied with the situation. But then also, I'm not sure whether he was aware or whether there were any opportunities at this point for him to, do things differently. And I think just me, growing up in a different time, a lot more digital, a lot more like, new age, strong culture companies around, I maybe had a better insight into kind of what's possible out there and a bit more exposure to these companies that were doing things a little bit differently. So probably, I was made aware of the problem by my dad, but then seeking the solution and finding a solution and doing things differently was something that I figured out myself and based on the values that I was given.
If I may ask, how does your dad feel about the way that you have structured your own business today?
Yeah, he loves it. I mean, at this point, he's actually retired. He and I share a lot of the same character traits in terms of being a tinker and a bit of a rebel in the sense of not wanting to do the same thing as the status quo. And so he no longer needs to work and do a job like this, but he's now in his tinkering phase as well, doing a lot of things with AI and, trying to build a bit of like a remote side income. So, he's going down the same path, his own medium and for his own requirements right now. So I think fully on board with that and just kind of seeing it in action as well. Again, I think it's a product of its time as well, because I think if he tried to do the same thing 20, 25 years ago, it might not have been possible. The internet wasn't quite as fast and capable back then, and people weren't used to working remotely and online. So might have been a bit of a different story, but I think he agrees with me that this is the way to go if you want to have a business like this. Obviously, everyone has different values. I wouldn't recommend someone trying to conquer space to do a remote company, but for, in terms of building yourself a good and flexible life, it's probably the way to go.
While I'm listening, I was thinking, so I'll just externalize it. I was like, okay, what was Dominic's dad didn't do as well on that specific part that we're talking about, the way that you are perceiving work or the way that you are perceiving goals, that you evolved it as a byproduct of not liking what he was going through. Like if you would meet your dad in the same age that you are at the moment, what would you try to tell him, to influence him or advise him to do differently?
Yeah, I mean, the hard part is you will have to make a sacrifice at some point, right? And we were talking about it earlier. I think for a business like this to exist, you need to give up on some amount of growth and financial success. I think there were contracts in the past that we couldn't do because it would have meant like staying online in time zones that wouldn't have been suitable for us. I think, being a smaller company, we're probably losing out on some of the enterprise contracts that like to see a 100 people team behind it and some funding and that kind of stuff. And I think let's go back 30 years and I'm talking to my dad. The same would kind of hold true there, where I don't think you can do the high reputation, very well paid sales job that gets you a lot of recognition in your from your peers and family and so on, where you have a nice shiny company car without a lot of stress. I think that's just the reality of, doing that kind of job in like the 90s and early 2000s. And I'm actually not sure what choice he would make 30 years ago. But laying that out, you can go work for a startup, a local company, maybe something like this, and you're going to have still a great salary, and you're also going to have a lot of free time and a good life and, some space to take a vacation and to travel and that kind of stuff. But obviously it's not going to come with the same benefits that the high reputation, high paid job comes. And I think making that decision, if you're just like thinking logically and maybe as a young person, you think, I can take a bit of stress, that's fine. Why wouldn't I go down that path? But I think from my side, seeing what happened with my dad and, how it ended and how, how tough these phases of burnout were, for me, it was like a cautionary tale, right? For me was, okay, the last thing I want out of my life is like being in burnout clinics, basically. So I need to find a way around that. I need to find a way to not fall into those traps, basically. I think if I would have never seen that and someone would have come to me and say, hey, would you rather build like $100 billion company and be insanely rich and successful and be in Forbes and TechCrunch or whatever, or would you like to build a smaller business that allows you to kind of live and travel everywhere? I'm not sure what I would have chosen, right? I think that's a product of growing up and experiences and seeing how things play out. But for me, that was the obvious choice to go down this path.
I'm also an only child, and I remember that whatever was happening in my house, I was really absorbing it,
Sure, yeah.
experiencing it in Dolby surround. So I was wondering, while those things were happening, while you would experience the burnout of your dad, how would your young version feel within the house? Did you want to solve something? Were you getting angry with him for not getting it? What was it that you were feeling, thinking?
Yeah. I mean, what you say definitely rings true. And not only an only child, but I'm also a child of divorce. So for a lot of times, it was actually just me and my mom one-on-one, or it would just be me and my dad one-on-one. So it wasn't even that my parents were talking to each other. It was actually like me talking to my parents. And I think, being younger, I was probably not as aware of it. I knew that my dad was stressed, and it was kind of weird that my dad was like taking calls at 9 p.m. It's just like being on the phone all the time. So probably being quite young, I was a bit annoyed that just, you know, my dad wasn't as present in the moment when we were playing or watching TV or whatever. But I think growing up and also me entering the workforce at a pretty young age, I think that got cleared up. Like I think those topics like burnout, they come up in the workplace fairly often. And so me being 15 years old, I knew what was going on and what was happening. And I think then you can have conversations on a much higher level than you can at 10 years old and not really understanding. So I think, from there on out, it was more support. But at the end of the day, I think people in this situation need to make these hard choices themselves. I think we definitely, I don't fully remember, that was a long time ago, but I definitely think we did have conversations about, is this worth it? What changes can you make? What are the options out there? I think, from that point of view, we're both quite like solution based, but at the end of the day, there needs to be an action. And again, probably a sacrifice. And my dad never went down that route and said, okay, I'm going to make a drastic change. And so that probably led to those stays in clinics and so on that were the result of that.
You are a little bit of an unusual type of high performer, because you are a little bit the opposite. It's like you can perform more, but you are controlling it. You're like, no more. I'm okay here.
That's so true. Yeah.
Typically people push themselves to perform better, especially when they can, when they have a momentum. But what you're reflecting to me is that you know your priorities.
Yeah. It's actually a common thread in my childhood that my parents went to teacher conferences, and my teachers would always complain that I was a really smart student, but I would prefer to study 10, 15 minutes and get a B, or in Switzerland, it's a 5. So get the second best grade instead of studying for 2 hours and getting an A or an A plus. And I think that was the common thread in my life. What was funny for me is my parents would then come home and say, that's so funny. Every teacher tells us this. You keep doing it. You don't need to change. It's just funny that everyone brings it up. And that was a common thread in my childhood, and probably also a common thread now, that I do love doing well and improving myself. And I'm always continuously learning. I'm someone that really enjoys learning, but I do not think that I need to get the last 10% and pay like 90% of the cost for it. So I'm quite happy being, I'm not sure whether that like reflects badly or anything, but I'm quite happy with getting the 90% for 10% of the effort. And then those other 10% are those that kind of come with the cost. Those are the things that come with cost to your health, to your mental health, to physical health, and then probably also just plain old longevity. Like pushing the last 10% are what breaks you and makes you not want to continue or give up, basically. And so following this principle, again, we were talking about it before, leads me to being able to do this for a long time, not to build something that's a short burst, but actually like not a sprint, but a marathon. It leads me to having a marathon and not a sprint. And I much prefer this pace. I think at some point in my life, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe I'm inclined to, with whatever's next, to do a sprint. And I think that's in itself also exciting to do a short burst of energy and do something like this. But especially a business like mine, where it's about people's future, where it's about people relying on it and wanting to build something of substance, I think it's much more important that I build something that can sustain and that can be around for a long time in a sustainable way, rather than something that grows fast and potentially implodes at some point.
The way you're talking, you make me feel like you are treating your time and your energy like a stockbroker, literally creating a portfolio so that it's very logical. It's not so emotional. It's like I have certain emotions, I have certain energy. I must make use of them in the most efficient way so that I do that for a long time, so that I win more than someone that sprints and burns out quickly.
Mm.
Sounds quite logical. Is it like that in your mind? The processing.
I think that's a good way to describe it. I think it's also just a great way to run not only your business, but probably your life to some degree. Because the beautiful thing about being an investor or being a venture capitalist or something is that you're able to experience a lot of things in a very sustainable manner. It's all about like balancing risk and, being able to get a gain from it. And I think that's why people go into VC or investing, is because you're able to get a lot of the upside while like managing the downside. And comparing to that, building a company feels quite reckless, right? It's almost not investing. It's more like a poker game where you're going all in and you're just trying to get as much outcome as possible. Again, I don't think that's like a wrong way of doing things, but if I had to choose between being a professional like stockbroker or trader and being a professional poker player, I'd rather be on Wall Street managing my risk and doing something like this rather than going all in Las Vegas, basically.
By the way, do you have any particular admiration to the Japanese philosophy or the Japanese mindset, or just happen that you are there?
A little bit of both, I think. So
Mm.
I've liked Japan for a long time. I've visited a couple of times, and I do hold a lot of what they do in very high regard. Probably the thing that I admire most is the eye to detail and the level of quality that's expected. And that's something now I'm quite excited, because so far I've been here on like trips and on vacation. Now I get to live here for a couple of months and I get to experience that firsthand. And I think, as with any other place, it's not perfect. And I think there's a lot of downsides to certain things as well. But I've kind of been comparing my experience here with my life in Switzerland. And I've also stayed in the US for the last couple of months, and just kind of comparing these cultures and, what values they hold. And I continuously see how in Japan people go the extra mile without being like prompted for it and without there being an incentive to do so. And I really love that aspect of it. I think one simple example is going shopping, like buying something. If you're going to Switzerland, you're spending quite a lot of money in whatever you're going to buy. But then in terms of customer support or customer service, you're going to go to the checkout. You're going to throw your thing that you're buying and you're out the door, right? And then you're going to the US and you're probably going to have a small talk with the person at the checkout desk, and they might even bag it up for you. And it's a bit of extra service. You might argue that it comes down to culture and definitely also like tipping and monetary incentive, but there's a certain level of customer service that you won't get in at least like Central and Western Europe. And then you're coming to Japan, and we just went shopping to a stationery store last week. And the person takes all of our things one by one, wraps them up in separate little paper baskets to make sure they don't get any nicks in them. They put it into another basket and they're putting a bow around the basket and passes the basket to make sure that our hand slips just the right way into like the little hole on the bag, right? And you get a little bow and you have a little bow back. And it's the same experience. Like we're just going to a store and buying something. But in one culture, I have no emotion at all. Maybe I even have some negative emotions about it. And in the other, I'm feeling happy right away. I'm feeling valued as a customer, but I'm also just feeling happy about the experience, right? And so I was actually posting about that this week, that every place I live in gives you a new piece and a new admiration and new things that you want to take with you. And customer service and attention to detail is something that I would take away from Japanese culture. Why not go the extra mile and do things a little bit extra without any expectation there of no money or a tip or whatever, just for the sake of it, because it makes like everyone involved feel nice. And that's something that I take into my life. That's also something that I take into my business and make sure maybe we should pass the basket in a way that the hand slips right into the right place instead of like making people DIY it basically.
What you're describing, I was reading a book a few years ago. It's not a super important book, more of a easy to read book called Ikigai. You might have heard it.
Yeah.
And some learnings from Stoicism and Ikigai kind of match, because it's like instead of trying to find what you will do next, just focus on doing well what you are doing now. And they define that as the purpose. The whole conversation about purpose, they call it a little silly. Purpose is what you're doing now. So focus and be stellar on that. While on the other hand, the Western society has a lot of work being a martyrdom. Let's work hard, burn ourselves out so that we can retire early and not work, instead of making what you do not overwhelming so that you can do it for a long time. These are two totally different philosophies. So a little bit of what you said, a little bit that you're in Japan, that's why I brought up the topic, if you have any particular love for the Japanese philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. Resonate with that for sure. And that's what I was also saying before. I think coming from a Western culture, spending time in the US, if I'm saying I'd rather give 90% and do it for the next 20 years, it almost feels lazy, right? Like talking about it. It feels like, oh, I'm not giving it my all. I should probably give it my all. But in the end, there's beauty in, I still give it my all, but I do it in a way that I enjoy it and that gives me purpose, right? Whatever purpose might be. And I want to execute at the highest level and just make people happy, rather than execute at the highest level and get as much profit as possible out of it. I think that's kind of where the disconnect comes from. It's not that I'm not giving it my all. It's just that I don't want to push it to a place where it's no longer an enjoyable and sustainable business. All right.
I love that conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very
would
much.
love to. Yeah, thank you.